I don't see any reason to engage in that kind of second guessing. I was delighted that the president got here as soon as security and other considerations could be taken care of. We went with him to the site. I'd been there earlier on Wednesday, and when I saw him in the Oval Office on Thursday, both Senator Schumer and I were delighted that he was going and that he was going to see firsthand what we saw, because I think, as anyone will tell you who's been down there, as good a job as you and all of our colleagues in journalism and especially on television have done describing what happened, you really cannot imagine what it looks like and feels like until you either fly over it or you see it, as I have.
And your daughter Chelsea was, what, 12 blocks away when it happened?
Yeah, she was in the area, staying with friends, and both Chuck Schumer and I were spending the early moments of this disaster trying to make sure that our daughters were okay. We were lucky, they were, but a lot of people haven't been as fortunate. And, you know, when I was at the Armory yesterday visiting with families who are still hoping that their loved one will be rescued, they have their pictures in hand and the stories that they want to tell, I just couldn't help but feel both grateful for the fact that my daughter was all right, but having a redoubled commitment to doing everything I could to help those families that are going to have to face the reality of having lost a child or a husband or a father or mother.
It's terrible. Let's talk about American life now, though. What happens in the future from the standpoint of the question of security versus relaxation or giving up some of the freedoms that we've enjoyed in this country? How far do we go, for instance, on airline security?
Well, I think everyone recognizes we have to tighten security. We have to do whatever it takes to keep our people safe.
Including profiling, Senator?
Well, I think we have to do whatever it takes, Sam, and I believe that, you know, Tuesday changed everything. Tuesday was a day that America has never, ever had to experience, and I hope to heaven that we never have to again. But we are in a war situation, and we're going to have to do things that people do in times of war. I just heard your interview with the mayor, and I think he's right to look at examples in history, like the Battle of Britain. Many of us have been studying what others did to carry on, and we know that we have to make trade-offs in convenience, in our freedom of movement, without undercutting or losing our way of life and our values, which are really what make America special and great, and we can't ever let anyone undermine that.
Do we get on airplanes now, and if there are people of Middle East origin, American citizens, for all we know, on that airplane, do we have a problem?
You know, Sam, yesterday at the Armory, when I was talking with the relief workers and the families of missing people, I saw every kind of American. You know, one family came up, you know, holding the pictures of having lost both a son and a daughter-in-law. They were Muslim Americans. Other families were telling me the story of, you know, their daughter who had just gotten married and would never, they thought, be with them again. Every shade of skin color, every kind of background. This was a blow at New York and at America and all we are. And
that's why I ask you, Senator, about profiling, because you say it takes, do everything it takes.
That's right.
Does it take profiling?
Well, you know, I think that's going to be up to the law enforcement experts. And I think we have to be cautious, we have to be careful, but let's not go overboard and start, you know, pointing fingers at Arab Americans, at Muslim Americans who are just as devoted Americans as you or I are. We have to find the terrorists, no matter where they are, here at home or abroad, and we have to strike at their sources of funding and support. But we have to do so with the full knowledge that we cannot let anyone, anywhere, change the character of America. So yes, we're going to take every precaution, every security measure that is required, but we're not going to let anyone undermine our way of life, and we're certainly not going to let law-abiding, decent, patriotic Americans, no matter what their religion or their background, be in some way pointed out or harassed.
Before I let you go, speak to this issue of more deaths in this country, perhaps for service personnel. One of the reasons given, and I would like you to respond to this, that your husband, when he was in office, used cruise missiles against Osama bin Laden and did not try to mount a ground operation, was a belief that the American public just wouldn't stand for casualties in our armed forces. Was that one of the reasons? And what about the future when it comes to casualties in the armed forces?
You know, Sam, as I say, I think everything changed on Tuesday. I think the American people have a much greater awareness of the enemy that we face and the sacrifices that will be necessary. I'm absolutely confident that the President and his advisors will put together a plan that will take into account the great difficulty we face. You know, I have some knowledge of what the terrain in that part of the world is like. I have a little sense of history, the successive attempts to try to conquer or invade or control Afghanistan, the most recent being by the former Soviet Union. This is an extraordinarily difficult undertaking, but we have to use any and all means that we believe will create conditions that will lead to the kind of positive outcome that we want. Yes, there will be sacrifices and there will be losses, but we have to proceed in a prudent and effective manner.
So in a word, if we have to take casualties in this war against terrorism, we're just going to have to accept that.
Sam, we just took casualties in New York City. We took maybe 5,000 casualties. We took them at the Pentagon. We have already had men and women, innocent civilians, killed in this war, and we've lost some of the bravest people you could ever meet. Our firefighters, our police officers, our emergency personnel who went in there. They were the frontline soldiers in this war against terrorism. We've already taken casualties. Now we are facing an implacable foe who stands against our way of life and our values. And this is a war that we have to pursue, but we have to do it in an effective and prudent manner. And it's going to take the patience of all of us. And that's why I think everyone has to support our president and all those who are attempting to find the source of this terrorism and stamp it out.
Thank you very much, Senator Clinton, for being with us today.
Thank you.
By the way, the official casualty figure has just gone over 5,000, 5,097. Missing figure is the one we're getting now. Still ahead, the airlines respond to questions about their security and their survival. Continental CEO Gordon Bethune and Delta CEO Leo Mullen will join us. Plus, a look at how the U.S. financial markets might react when they reopen tomorrow, with Goldman Sachs International's Bob Hormats. Right after this.
People put off till tomorrow the things they should do today. It's easy, right?
Anthony Padilla, AXA Advisors.
Especially when it comes to a financial plan. I work with a lot of people my age. They say, Anthony, I'm young. What's the rush?
AXA Advisors is one-on-one financial help.
I say, start now. Sure, you've got a lot of expenses, but you've got this huge advantage, too, and that's time. Hey, I know it isn't easy, but my job is to get you started.
AXA Advisors, building futures.
Enter a new era of discovery at Bristol-Myers Squibb, where groundbreaking genetic research is underway.
Winning the Tour de France was a victory for cancer medicines. But Luke, it's just the start of incredible things to come.
At the Bristol-Myers Squibb Center for Applied Genomics, researchers strive to unlock the secrets of breast cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes to lead the way in new frontiers against disease.
Hope, triumph, and the miracle of medicine. Bristol-Myers Squibb Company.
Once again, from New York, George Stephanopoulos.
As we just heard, the number of missing continues to climb, now above 5,000 to 5,097. And the attack and its aftershocks have been devastating to the airline industry. Airline officials are already lobbying for a bailout on Capitol Hill. In a moment, we'll speak with the CEOs of Continental and Delta Airline. But first, here's ABC's Lisa Stark at Dulles Airport.
Well, George, even before Tuesday, this year was shaping up as an economic disaster for the industry. Now it is an economic catastrophe. Previously, it was estimated the airlines would lose about $3.5 billion this year. It's now estimated it could be more than 3 times that much. As we've mentioned, they've already lost $1 billion this week alone, and those losses will continue. They are fearful that fearful passengers will stay away from the airlines in droves, and we are already hearing this morning that 300 flight attendants with Northwest Airlines are taking unpaid leave because they are too traumatized to fly. In addition to losing all of this business, the airlines have dramatically increased costs now because of all of the increased security. We are already seeing the effects of some of this. Continental Airlines has announced a 20% reduction in schedule, 12,000 layoffs. American and Northwest are both cutting schedules by 20% and evaluating their staffing. U.S. Airways has asked a number of its employees to take a 25% pay cut. And Midway Airlines, a small carrier that was already in bankruptcy, has now closed up shop and laid off 1,700 people. By some estimates, 100,000 airline employees could lose their jobs, and a number of the major carriers could be forced into bankruptcy. It is likely that the stock prices of the airlines will tumble when the market reopens tomorrow. And all of this has a ripple effect. It affects hotels, rental cars, city tourism. So this will broadly affect the U.S. economy. Because of this, the CEOs are expected to sit down and meet with the Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta, possibly as early as tomorrow, to discuss their economic situation. George?
And Lisa, they say they need a bailout. Where does that stand now on Capitol Hill?
Well, members of Congress did consider a $15 billion relief package. Part of it would have been grants, part of it loan guarantees. That did not pass on Friday, but it is still very much on the table.
Okay, Lisa Stark, thanks very much. And joining us now from Houston is Continental Airlines Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Gordon Bethune, and in Atlanta, Delta Airlines Chairman and CEO Leo Mullen. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Mr. Bethune, let me start with you. You heard those numbers from Lisa Stark just a minute ago, but so far the White House has not said that they will support bailout legislation. How can you convince President Bush to support it?
Well, I think he'll read and watch this show and hear from the employees that are losing their jobs in an ever-increasing number, and ultimately they'll have to do something. If you want to have an air transportation system in this country that can get the economic engine running again, you're going to have to do something. Nothing won't work.
Mr. Mullen, can your airline get through this without further furloughs and without a bailout?
Well, I think that in the immediate term, we will be having cutbacks in capacity of the order that was mentioned, about 20% or so. And were this to go on for any extended time without aid from the federal government, then we would absolutely have to consider employee reductions of that size as an option. Obviously, when that is done, it represents a terrific blow to the capacity of the airlines to serve and to carry out all of the security measures that are being provided. I think that it's just crucial in dealing with the government, which we have found, by the way, very receptive to these thoughts, is that the airline industry cannot be made the first casualty of this war. And we are working with the government, and I think in a very positive way, to ensure that we do maintain our capacity to serve.
What other measures is Congress going to have to take, Mr. Bethune? One suggestion on the table is that American and United Airlines are going to need some shield from the liability for these attacks.
Well, I think ultimately they can get to that. I think the more pressing need is to get the confidence of the traveling public restored, keep us available to be there when they do come back. Right now, they've disappeared. And quite frankly, we need to be there when they come back, or otherwise we won't have commerce in this country. So that's an issue, but it's not an issue we need to address today.
Mr. Mullen, what do you say to the people who say, listen, we're just too scared to fly?
Well, I think that the security measures that are being taken are very, very positive. As one looks at what happened last week, obviously on Tuesday, we were all consumed with the safety and security of everybody, passengers, employees, in dealing with this terrific challenge that all of us in America did face. But then very rapidly on Wednesday, we went into an extensive discussion involving the industry and the government, many, many sessions over the phone largely, in remaking the security of this country's airline system. And that, I think, has been done in an extraordinarily satisfactory way. I myself do have great confidence in the measures that are being taken. I think they're responsive to the test that we have ahead of us, and I think it should give high confidence in our ability to provide a safe and secure aviation system.
I guess the question is, what more are we going to need? And Mr. Bethune, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta just announced today that he's going to be appointing a task force on security that's going to be looking at a wide range of measures. In the past, the industry has been reluctant to support very strict security measures, and I want to know, do you think that attitude is changing now, and are you prepared to support measures like armed marshals on all planes?
Well, absolutely, but I also believe that we need to have a balance between having a system that works and one that doesn't work. So we need the increased security. I think we've all bought into that, and we all need that, but what we really need is a system that works. This system today is failing because the confidence of the